Between 1975 and 1979, Cambodia suffered under the brutal reign of the Communist Party of Kampuchea, whose genocidal campaign wiped out a quarter of the nation's people. Around 1 million citizens were put to death, targeted either as alleged political dissidents or because of their ethnic origins. Members of the Muslim Cham, Vietnamese, Chinese, Thai and Laotian communities were systematically targeted. Beyond these direct slaughters, another 1 million Cambodians lost their lives to hunger, disease and lethal overwork. The rise of this murderous government followed decades of deep political chaos. In the wake of the Second World War, Prince Norodom Sihanouk secured Cambodia's freedom, ending nearly 9 decades of French domination. However, the monarch's authoritarian approach soon sparked widespread domestic discontent. Particularly aggressive communist insurgents, having previously fought French colonial rule, redirected their efforts toward removing the prince from power. This fragile state of affairs grew even more volatile, due to a conflict escalating just beyond Cambodia's frontiers. Over in Vietnam, a massive American military deployment aided the non-communist South against northern communist forces. Though Washington pressured Cambodia to join their ranks, Prince Sihanouk strove to maintain absolute neutrality. However, a 1970 coup led by his prime minister paved the way for US forces to launch airstrikes across Cambodia in pursuit of North Vietnamese troops. Tragically, these relentless bombardments claimed the lives of thousands of innocent Cambodian civilians. Seeking to reclaim his lost throne, the deposed prince forged an alliance with his bitterest rivals. These adversaries belonged to the Communist Party of Kampuchea, better known as the Khmer Rouge, whose leaders envisioned a classless nation entirely dedicated to agrarian cooperative farming. They stood against Western capitalism and imperialism, aiming to guide their nation toward total self-reliance. However, the populace viewed them mainly as a rebel movement clashing with the Washington-aligned administration. Devastating US airstrikes fueled widespread outrage, and when the prince rallied his people, countless Cambodians aligned with the Khmer Rouge. This triggered a fierce, all-out civil war. Across 5 years of relentless bloodshed, the grim conflict claimed the lives of over 500,000 citizens. However, the bloodshed only intensified after the insurgents seized Phnom Penh in April 1975. Once in control of the capital, the Khmer Rouge immediately began slaughtering anyone tied to the prior regime. With Prince Sihanouk stripped of his authority and confined to his residence, the Khmer Rouge commenced the forced relocation of urban populations to rural regions. Those physically unable to endure the march were simply left behind, fracturing innumerable families. Under this harsh new authority, people were stripped of all possessions and forced into uniform clothing and hairstyles. Personal wealth, commerce, and faith were completely banned. Faced with unrealistic grain targets, regional officials risked execution if they fell short. Consequently, they prioritized shipping crops to the capital over feeding their own starving laborers. Starving, exhausted, and ravaged by disease, thousands of workers lost their lives. Even the Khmer Rouge cadres overseeing them weren't immune to the deadly conditions. As agricultural targets fell desperately short, the regime's high command descended into deep paranoia. Fearing domestic saboteurs would derail their uprising, they launched a campaign of arrests and executions against suspected dissidents. For nearly 4 years, this relentless violence went unchecked. It wasn't until 1979 that Vietnamese forces, allied with Khmer Rouge defectors, seized control of the nation. This sudden power shift ignited a new internal conflict that dragged on into the 1990s. For survivors, the road to accountability remained long and incredibly difficult. In 2003, a joint UN-Cambodian court was set up, though its prosecution was limited exclusively to high-ranking Khmer Rouge commanders. While subordinate members did participate in the hearings, they were exempt from facing criminal charges. Rather than staying silent, they took the stand to expose the brutal regime that permitted their commanders' atrocities. A few of these wrongdoers were eventually classified as victims by the courts, having operated under a continuous threat of death and resorting to brutality solely to survive. Outside the halls of justice, ordinary Khmer Rouge cadres were increasingly viewed as victims in their own right. Just like the rest of the population, these lower-ranking members endured the loss of loved ones, severe starvation, displacement, and grueling forced labor. Indeed, rampant paranoia among the Khmer Rouge High Command meant their own cadres were executed at an even higher rate than the civilian majority. Consequently, most modern Cambodians view the atrocities not merely as a purge of ethnic minorities, but as a sweeping wave of terror that targeted the entire nation. Yet, as of 2021, only 3 individuals have been sentenced to prison. Numerous survivors hope the court will prosecute more Khmer Rouge figures. Even so, a nationwide poll from 2018 indicated that a majority of victims believe the tribunal successfully delivered justice. Following such immense devastation, it is easy to reduce the conflict to a simple story of victims versus villains. But for most Cambodians, the truth is far more tangled. Pain was felt by everyone, even those who played a part in inflicting it. While these views never justify violent behavior, the way a nation recalls its painful history shapes who we blame, who we pity, and how a broken people can forge a way forward.